Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. I was simply captivated by the aspect of African Americans in the Civil War. After all, the war was about their freedom. But enough with this. Let's be serious. The year is 1862, the month of July specifically. After the failure to emancipate slaves to join the Union military, the United States passes the Second Confiscation and Militia Act, which freed all slaves who had masters in the Confederate Army. In May of the next year, Congress established a department managing all black troops. 2 days after the Second Confiscation and Militia Act, slavery was abolished completely in the North. And 5 days after the act was passed, President Lincoln presented his first draft of the Emancipation Proclamation. The first to actually enlist in the military were men from South Carolina, Tennessee, and Massachusetts. However, after this initial wave of support, there was a very little amount of enlistment actually happening. Now, because of this, black leaders such as Frederick Douglass started actively encouraging black men to join the military, and more started to join. Even then, however, most men never actually saw combat, as because of racial prejudices, they were put in more menial tasks, like carpentry, cooking. However, there were some non-combat options that did have more of an impact, such as surgeons, guards, nurses, scouts, spies. Now, inequality was present from the start. Many people in the Union Army were in fact prejudiced, and although units were typically segregated, most black units were commanded by white officers. Not only that, but the pay between blacks and whites was very disparate. The black troops usually were paid $10 a month as opposed to a white $13 a month. But black troops also had a fee for clothing and rations that whites did not have, with $3 being automatically deducted from their salaries. So, in actuality, the pay disparage was actually $7 a month to $13 a month. And it wasn't until 1864 that Congress granted troops equal pay and rations. Not only that, but troops captured by the Confederacy ran the risk of being shot to death, as demonstrated at Fort Pillow, where they were massacred in captivity. While a law dating from 1792 actually prohibited black people from enlisting, by the end of the war, 179,000 to 180,000 men had served, about 10% of the Union Army. This is a letter. Actually, let me change clothes. Now, as I was saying, this is a letter sent by the President Abraham Lincoln to a congressman. The letter describes a meeting that the president had. The meeting was with the widow of a soldier who was slain at Fort Pillow during the massacre. Now, in that day, widows and orphans did not have benefits if their benefactor was killed in the military. President Lincoln wanted to change that. He wrote to this congressman urging him to create a law, support a law, that gave black widows and orphans some help. The message from President Lincoln reads, "My dear sir, the bearer of this is the widow of Major Booth, who fell at Fort Pillow. She makes a point which I think very worthy of consideration, which is widows and children, in fact, of colored soldiers who fell in our service, be placed in law, the same as if their marriages were legal, so that they can have the benefits of the provisions, the widows and orphans of white soldiers. Please see and hear Mr. Booth. Yours truly, Abraham Lincoln." Now, let's talk statistics. By the end of the Civil War, we know that around 180,000 black men served in the U.S. Army. However, 19,000 black men also served in the Navy. In total, around 40,000 black soldiers died over the course of the war, with around 7,000 being in combat, with another 30,000 being from infection or disease. Interestingly enough, although there were 200,000 black soldiers who actually served in the military, only 66 bodies of African American men were never identified. Following that, around the exact amount of men who were massacred at Fort Pillow was around the size of 200. Going on that, for every one person that died in combat, about 9 people died from disease or infection, mainly because of the fact that, going back on that prejudice, blacks were offered very little or no health care whatsoever during the course of the war. Now, as for battles of black Americans in the Civil War, at the Battle of Olustee, while the Union may have lost, it was the black troops that covered the Union troops' retreat back to safety. And furthermore, in the battles at Port Hudson, black troops were commended for their heroism and reliability during the battles. To close, even though black troops were paid less, had less supportive jobs, were discriminated against, they still wanted to fight for their freedom, and eventually they did win the war.